From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine. Glad you are with us tonight, talking about a very important topic, something that impacts many parents, basically all parents, COVID-19, and in juveniles. And certainly we've just had this news about the vaccine now being, Pfizer is saying that it's ready for the next phase to begin as far as distributing this vaccine for children who are 0 to 12. So we're going to be talking with a doctor about that tonight. This will be your chance to call in with any questions you may have just about where we stand with COVID and juveniles, and certainly what is going to be happening over the next few months as a vaccine happens for these younger kids. So happy to have with us Dr. Isaac Thomsen. He is Associate Professor of Pediatric Infectious Diseases at Vanderbilt, joining us via Zoom at Vanderbilt. Doctor, thank you for being with us.
Hey, good evening. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So what are we seeing right now as far as juvenile cases and COVID? What are you seeing at Vanderbilt right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things that has been really striking to us at the hospital, and really anybody in hospitals around this part of the country, in children's hospitals, is this recent wave. It's called the Delta wave, named for the Delta variant of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID. And, this wave was different. It was different in a lot of ways, but, probably the biggest, most striking one to us in pediatric infectious diseases was that kids were so much more affected this time. We can go into some detail about that if it would be helpful, but I think in terms of sort of general overview of it, this Delta variant it's much more contagious, so it spreads much more easily, and it clearly was able to infect kids so much more effectively than previous variants of this virus. To the point that, for many months, all through 2020 into early 2021, I found myself all the time saying, as the world was sort of upended by this pandemic, I would say, well, gosh, the one sort of silver lining of this is that kids aren't affected that much, right? That was sort of the one as a parent. You're like, this is bad, but at least kids are relatively spared. And that hasn't been the case with this wave. So at the end of August, 40% of new COVID cases in the state of Tennessee were in children under the age of 18. That's receding a little bit. So there is, a little bit of good news. I think we are coming down in Tennessee. It looks like our real peak burden was a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, something like that. We're starting to come down. We're still seeing a lot, and far more than in any other phase of this pandemic. But I do think there's some room for some optimism of this wave. But I think what this also told us is, we're not done with this, or maybe better said, COVID's not done with us. If we continue to have vaccination rates lower than they need to be, we're going to keep seeing waves. And so I hope this got some attention, and we can talk some more about that hopefully throughout this hour. Yeah,
let's do it. I want to talk about the vaccine, as I said, and I want to kind of expand on what you just said. So we have heard throughout much of the pandemic that the younger kids are not badly impacted, exactly as you said. So are you saying, I guess my question about this wave and the increase that we're seeing in kids, is what we're seeing more dangerous for kids, or is it just a result of more kids being out now and getting infected, and then there's a small percentage that are actually getting really sick, or are a larger percentage of those infected now actually getting really sick?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question. We don't entirely know yet. We need some time to sort of assess, and those are kind of epidemiologic studies that are not. It's not super clear yet if per child the kids are getting sicker. Probably not much. It's much more on the other thing you said, which is it's so much more effective. It's out there so much more. I think you have a combination of two things. Number one, kids were back in school. A lot of the distancing and mitigation and all that went way down. And then you have a strain of the virus that's much more capable of infecting. And that was a 1-2 punch. So you got a virus that gets around better, and you got kids at school Lots of places they're not wearing masks in school, all that. And so that combination just allowed this to spread like wildfire. And so, I mean, I'll tell you that our children's hospital, all the children's hospital in the region, in the U.S. South, were at, had by far broke their records of any other time in the pandemic, of number of kids in the hospital with COVID, number of kids in the ICU with COVID, all of that. They still overall are doing okay with it compared to older adults, those with lots of risk factors, things like that. But we are seeing kids with bad outcomes, and we are seeing deaths. It tends to be in those with risk factors, but we can't always predict it. And I'll tell you that as a parent, I sort of wear the hats of pediatric infectious disease doctor and a parent. I've got 3 school-age kids. One of the things that scares me the most about this virus is we can't always predict those that do really poorly, those that have long-term outcomes, because it's not just about deaths. It's not even just about ICU. Long COVID, long-term issues with heart, with brain, with all these things. We can't always predict who that's going to be. And that scares me a lot. And we certainly have seen more in terms of landing in the hospital, these long-term issues, things like that. We're at higher numbers in children than we've been at any point in this whole pandemic.
Well, and that's interesting because, again, as the pandemic was unfolding, it seemed like what we heard over and over is certainly in adults, underlying conditions, those with underlying conditions, whether it be high blood pressure or some overweight sort of issues. Is there any condition in children that leads to bigger problems, or you're not aware, you're not able to say? What about that?
Yeah, we do know that that being overweight, that obesity seems to be a risk factor for hospitalization for more severe illness, underlying lung problems, underlying immune system issues. I would say the majority of the kids that we've had that have gotten very, very sick, have needed long stays in the ICU, some that have died, most of those had some combination of those conditions, whether it's immune system issues, heart and lung problems, obesity, some combination, but again, not always. And which is the same thing that we saw in adults. We know those risk factors, but any ICU doctor in the country can tell you they've got this list of a few folks that they lost, but they can't tell you why. They say, I can't say what their risk factor was. I didn't expect them to do that poorly, and we lost them. They died in our hands. And again, that's one of the factors of this that's scary for me. Yeah, we can make predictions, and they're okay, but they're not perfect. And this virus has fooled us a lot, and I think we have to remain aware of that. And
it's, all right, I'm excited to be talking to you as a pediatric infectious disease person, because this has been my burning question throughout this whole thing. And I don't think you're going to be able to answer this, but when this all started, it was astounding to me that it didn't impact kids that much. You see the movies, and it impacts everybody. Pick any movie about one of these things, and that's what happens. Do you have any idea why, at least in the beginning, and I know you're saying it's changing now, but do you have any idea why in the beginning children were not impacted? Is it something with, I don't know, breathing? What could it be? Do you all have any idea?
Yeah, so no one really knows for sure. There are a couple of theories and a couple of things probably at play. One thing that we are starting to realize, as and again, getting large-scale information takes a while, and so we're just now getting really detailed glimpses from large epidemiologic studies from months ago and before the Delta wave and all that. One thing that we're realizing is more kids were involved than we realized. Kids are very likely to be asymptomatically infected. And in a really good study that was led by some of my colleagues at Vanderbilt, they swabbed every household member of families in all these intervals and went back and looked at it. And pretty frequently, the kids were just asymptomatically infected, and we didn't know it. And so I don't know that they were quite as spared as we thought. It does seem to be that earlier on, they were less susceptible to becoming infected. That may have been because I think we did a better job sequestering and distancing our kids than some adults did. Schools were closed, but adults were still going to work and those sorts of things. And so maybe exposures were a little bit less, but it seems different than what we're seeing now, even accounting for that. And so I guess my personal thing, and this is a little bit of a theory, it's based on some evidence, but kids were more affected than we realized early on, but Delta, because it moves around better, it makes people sicker. We're seeing it much more in kids, where maybe some of these kids would have just been asymptomatically infected before, Now they're sick. Now they're ending up in the hospital, that sort of thing, because Delta is, again, yeah, it takes a much smaller amount of virus to make someone sick, and we shed a much higher number of that virus. So once someone is sick with Delta, there's more of it pouring out of their nose, out of their mouth, out in their secretions, and then it takes a less of it to make someone sick. And so again, that combo makes it really effective to spread. So I think we've just turned up the noise. We've turned up the volume on this, and so we're seeing that kids, where maybe before it would have been much milder, now they're getting sicker.
Interesting. All right, what about the vaccine? So just it's Pfizer, right? They've come out and said that they believe it's safe for kids 0 to 12, 0 to 11. What? 5 through 11 so far. Yes. All right, well, good.
Yeah.
Please correct me. Okay, 5 through 11, not 0. Okay, so please, 5 through 11. Tell us about where things stand with the vaccine. When do you think we will start being able to give kids the vaccine?
Yeah, so what the news from this week was that Pfizer they've completed their data, their planned analysis for this trial for this age group, 5 through 12. The younger, I think, 2 to 4, sit down to 6 months. Those are ongoing, so that'll be a little bit later. But what they're ready with right now is 5 to 11. They're going to be filing that with the FDA soon. And in their hands, by their review, they're very encouraged. It's been extremely safe. They didn't see any unexpected side effects. We know from some of the older adolescents and young adults, there's this issue with myocarditis that was occurring in rare cases where some of these vaccine side effects were irritating the heart. COVID infection does it at a much higher rate, by the way, but the vaccine was in very rare cases doing that. But they didn't see any of that in the 5 to 11 group. So it looks extremely safe. It made just as good of an immune response. This is per their report. I haven't seen these data myself. Very few people have so far. Once the FDA reviews it, they'll release the information. We can all look at it, and they'll make their decision on whether they're going to authorize it for use. So really the question becomes, how quickly will the FDA be able to move on this? The FDA is not known for speed so much. That's not one of their typical hallmarks. However, they are aware of the urgency of this situation. I think the Delta wave has gotten everybody's attention. If you think about it, a few months ago, when we kind of were in that period where everything was better and it looked like we were in a good place with the pandemic and it kind of felt like we could take a breath and take our time, and it seemed like we had some time to just go slowly on this. Delta wave has changed that. So the FDA knows that they need an expedited review of this. That doesn't mean they can cut any corners. They still need to review everything. They still need to look at all of it. It may just mean longer hours for folks there. It doesn't mean that they're going to do less in terms of an evaluation of this. So I would say, something like a 3 to 4 week turnaround would be probably really good in terms of achievable, faster than usual, but still within reason. So if Pfizer files, in the next week or so and FDA gets things turned around, maybe we're looking at end of October, early November for an approval. It'll be a 2-shot series, just like the adult version. It's a lower dose, but still 2 doses. And so, I've told my kids maybe they'll, be able to get a Halloween dose and a Thanksgiving dose and be fully vaccinated by Christmas, something like that.
Let's say, and I'm going to ask you in a moment, what do you say to parents who are concerned about the vaccine and all of that? And I think those are, valid questions. But let's say a lot of people comply. Let's say that timeline is right on. People comply, kids do, and a lot of them are vaccinated by Thanksgiving, the second dose. Best case scenario, theory. Yep. What does that mean then for the virus? When are we going to be able to put this thing in the rearview mirror and just stop talking about it and live our lives without some of the things that we've been talking about? When do we get to normalcy, assuming people, follow to some extent these vaccines?
Yeah. Well, Ben, I'll say that and maybe I want to say this as clearly as I possibly can. The vaccine is, without question, our path to what you just said, our path to normal, our path to where we're not continuing to do conversations at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday evening talking about COVID. Our path to get that to that place is with vaccine. What we just learned from the Delta wave is it's not enough to have, overall in the U.S., we're about 60% vaccinated. That's quite a bit lower in the American South. States like Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi were more in the 40-ish%, somewhere in there. That's clearly far too low to keep rates down. And when we allow this virus to circulate rampantly through our community, it's going to change. It's going to evolve. And that's what the Delta variant is. It's a new levels up, so to speak. So and the more that we allow it to circulate, the more that we allow it to continue to mutate. And so we've got to get much, much higher vaccine coverage than we have. This is a winnable battle. This is something we can do. We just have got to get folks to participate. And, you know, I'm happy to talk through and, you know, questions that folks have, concerns, et cetera, because it's critically important. It's the most important thing we can talk about on this segment, because we can talk all kinds of things about should you do this or that, mask here, mask what, but if we get vaccines, we get shots in the arms with sleeves rolled up, we get enough of it, we can drive this down so we can stop having these conversations at all.
All right, so I want to encourage parents to call, well, anyone calling, grandparents, parents, anybody, call in. If you have questions for the doctor, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS. And doctor, what would you say to a parent who is concerned about giving this to their 6-year-old? You know, what do you say?
Yeah, of course. So I think the main thing I would say is, you know, again, I'm a parent. I'm home right now. I've got a 10-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 5-year-old. So none of my 3 kids have yet been able to be vaccinated. As soon as Pfizer's vaccine gets authorization from the FDA, all 3 of mine will immediately become vaccine eligible, and we'll be at the first appointment that we can find. All right. So actions speak louder than words. My kids may not be super pumped to hear that, but it's true. We'll be at the first shot appointment that we can get. So why do I say that? It's because of 2 things. Number one, these vaccines have been thoroughly studied. We have not had rapid, large-scale, just humongous clinical trials. They've been going on since July. We've never had it on this scale before for anything else that we've done. You know, I hear from a lot of folks, oh, this was done quickly. Maybe I'm worried about this because it was developed so fast. So I want to make sure that people understand, yes, this was developed more quickly than we usually do because we had to, because we were in a global pandemic. And so what happened is everybody in the field dropped whatever they thought they were going to be working on in 2020 and worked on this. It's never happened before. It's absolutely unprecedented in science and medicine. And every single, to a person, when 2020 started, they had different plans, vaccinologists, clinical trialists, infectious diseases doctors, everybody. It all shifted, right? In March and April of 2020, everybody dropped everything, worked on this. Sites across the country cooperating, enrolling tens of thousands of people. It was thoroughly studied, and that was also now well over a year ago. And so we have a really good handle on this vaccine. We know it's incredibly safe. It works extremely well. And so what I would say to parents who are nervous, they feel like, so if you're a parent, you say, I feel like it's my job to protect my child, right? That's their number one job as a parent, protect our child, keep them safe, all right? And I think that sometimes parents get confused and they think that means they should keep their child safe from the vaccine. They should protect them from the vaccine. That's exactly the wrong way to think about it. The virus is what you need to protect them for. If there's this idea of keeping our children pure. I want to keep them pure. And so the virus is what's impure. The vaccine is the way to protect them from that. The vaccine is the shield around something that's trying to harm your child. There's kids in the hospital right now, 200 feet this direction, really sick from this virus. And the vaccine is the way to protect them from that. So you've got to change your thinking and embrace this just absolute triumph of science and medicine that is incredibly safe and incredibly effective. And I'll tell you that as a parent, I don't know that I wouldn't sleep well at night knowing that the vaccine was out there if my child hadn't got it. And that's based on what I've seen. And I think this is another big challenge in this pandemic, is it's going to be hard for folks to get information. They don't understand what to believe, what to trust, whatever. I'm just telling you what I've seen directly for the last year and a half is what's causing me to want to be in the front of the line with my kids when the vaccine's available.
All right, very good. Well, doctor, thank you. All right, we're going to take a break, and then we'll just open up the phone lines. They're open now. Earl is on the line. Others, hold on. And if you want to call in with a question directly for the doctor, this is your chance. There's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.